That wasn't the response she had anticipated. Her perfectly sculpted eyebrows twitched slightly, betraying the briefest flicker of doubt before she masked it with a confident smile. She had rehearsed this conversation in her head, imagining how Ethan would protest, how he would fight for her. She had seen this play out with other men before, always in control, always leaving the door open just enough to have them waiting, hoping, begging for another chance. She had no intention of ending things completely, of course. She just wanted space, a little breathing room, some excitement. Ethan was stable, reliable, and yes, successful, but he was predictable, and Ivy thrived on unpredictability. A few weeks apart would allow her the freedom to explore, test the waters, and still return to the comfort and security of a man who adored her. At least that's how it was supposed to go. That night, Ivy went to bed with a self-satisfied smirk, sure that Ethan would reach out within days, maybe hours, trying to work things out. But when she woke up, the first thing she noticed was the eerie silence. No whirring of the coffee machine, no rustling of newspaper pages, no familiar sounds of Ethan moving around the house. Something felt off. She sat up, her silk sheets pooling around her waist, and reached for her phone. A sharp pang of confusion cut through her drowsiness when she saw no texts, no missed calls from Ethan. That was odd. She had expected at least some kind of message, maybe a late-night attempt to talk things over, or a casual good morning out of habit. Frowning, she threw the covers off and walked into the kitchen. Her heels clicked against the marble floor as she glanced around. The usual coffee mug wasn't there. The smell of fresh espresso was absent. Then she noticed it. The house was empty, not just quiet, empty. Her stomach twisted as her eyes darted around the space. The sleek gray couch, gone. The bookshelves, once lined with Ethan's carefully arranged novels and business books, bare. Even the minimalist decor she had chosen to complement the aesthetic, missing. Heart hammering, she turned and ran to the bedroom closet. The doors swung open to reveal nothing but empty hangers swaying slightly, the faint scent of his cologne lingering like a ghost. Her breath caught in her throat. She spun around and grabbed her phone, her fingers trembling as she unlocked it. A single text from Ethan sat on the screen. "Here's all the space you wanted." Her smirk vanished. Ivy stared at her phone, the words blurring as her mind raced. "Here's all the space you wanted." Her fingers tightened around the device as she reread the message, hoping she had somehow misinterpreted it. But no, there was no ambiguity, no room for doubt. A cold dread settled in her chest, a slow, creeping sensation that coiled around her spine and sent shivers down her back. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She turned on her heel, her silk robe billowing behind her as she stormed through the house, her heart pounding. She flung open drawers, yanked open cabinets, frantically searching for something, anything, that indicated this was temporary, a joke, some kind of misunderstanding. But no, everything was gone. The expensive leather chairs, the glass coffee table, even the ridiculous decorative bowl she had insisted they buy on vacation in Santorini, vanished. The refrigerator hummed softly, but when she yanked the door open, it was empty except for a single bottle of sparkling water and a jar of mustard. She let out a sharp breath, her panic morphing into disbelief. This couldn't be real. Ethan was methodical, yes, but he wasn't cruel. He wasn't impulsive. He wasn't the kind of man who would just disappear overnight. Unless he had planned this. Her throat tightened as realization set in. This wasn't a reaction. This was an execution. She rushed back to the bedroom and grabbed her phone with trembling hands, scrolling through her contacts. Her thumb hovered over Ethan's name before she pressed it, bringing the phone to her ear. It rang once, twice, then straight to voicemail. She inhaled sharply, then called again. Same result. With a frustrated growl, she threw the phone onto the bed and ran to the closet again, as if staring at the empty racks would somehow make his clothes reappear. But instead, something else caught her eye. A single sheet of paper taped to the back wall of the closet. Her stomach dropped. Slowly, hesitantly, she stepped forward and peeled it off. A bank statement. Her eyes flicked across the numbers, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The account she shared with Ethan, the account that once held more money than she cared to count, was now showing a balance of exactly $0. Her breath hitched. She scrolled down, seeing multiple transfers, withdrawals, all clean, all precise. He had taken everything. She felt the floor tilt beneath her as a wave of nausea rolled through her. This wasn't just a dramatic exit. This was annihilation. She stumbled back, gripping the doorframe for support. Her brain struggled to process the magnitude of what had happened. The house wasn't hers. The money wasn't hers. Even the car sitting in the garage, it was registered in his name. She was, for the first time in her adult life, truly alone. A new kind of panic took hold. She sprinted to her vanity, yanking open a drawer where she kept her emergency credit card, the one she had hidden away for her own security, just in case. She snatched it up, flipped it over in her fingers, and quickly tapped it into her phone's banking app. Declined. A strangled noise escaped her lips. She tried again. Declined. A shaky breath. Again. Account frozen. Ivy's fingers curled into the edge of the dresser, her knuckles whitening. Her mind was spinning, trying to understand the extent of what had just happened. Ethan hadn't just left. He had erased her. This couldn't be real. There had to be something left. She had planned for a break, not destruction. Desperation surged through her as she grabbed her phone again and scrolled through her contacts. She needed someone, anyone, who could fix this. She tapped on Jenna's name, her closest friend, someone she could count on. The line rang, and relief flooded her chest when Jenna picked up. "Hey, Ivy, what's up?" Ivy's breath was uneven as she tried to keep her voice steady. "Jenna, I need help. Something happened with Ethan, and I think—" "Oh, Ethan." Jenna's tone shifted, her voice suddenly clipped. "Yeah, I don't think I can get involved in whatever's going on between you two." Ivy blinked. "What? What do you mean?" There was an awkward pause. "Look, Ivy, word's already going around, and honestly, I can't say I blame him. You kinda did this to yourself, didn't you?" Ivy's stomach twisted. "Jenna, wait, what do you mean word's already going around?" A sigh. Ethan made sure people knew his side first. You might want to check your messages. Before Ivy could respond, the line went dead. Her pulse thundered as she pulled up her texts and social media. Her inbox was flooded, not with sympathy, not with support, but with silence. Unread messages, people leaving her on read, some even unfollowing her. And worse, screenshots. Screenshots of her texts with Ethan, her flirty conversations with other guys, her own words used against her. Messages she thought were private, exposed. She gasped, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through the damage. Ethan hadn't just left. He had dismantled her entire world. Ivy sat on the edge of the bed, staring blankly at her phone. Her entire world had unraveled in less than 24 hours, and she had no idea how to fix it. The house, the money, the reputation she had so carefully curated, all of it was gone, slipping through her fingers like sand. She forced herself to take a deep breath, willing herself to think clearly. There had to be a way out of this mess. There always was. She had gotten out of difficult situations before, twisting words, bending reality in her favor. Men were predictable, weak in the face of tears and apologies. Maybe Ethan just needed time. Maybe he was waiting for her to break, to come running after him, sobbing, begging for him back. Yes, that had to be it. Determined, she unlocked her phone and scrolled through her contacts again, ignoring the pit in her stomach. She found Ethan's name and called. Straight to voicemail. She tried again, and again. Nothing. She gritted her teeth. Fine. He wanted space. He'd had his fun. Now it was time to talk. She texted him. "Ethan, I get it. You're upset. But can we be adults about this? Let's talk. This is ridiculous." She stared at the message, waiting for the read receipt, waiting for the 3 little dots that would tell her he was typing. Nothing. Okay, if he was going to be petty, she could play that game too. She opened Instagram, scrolling through her followers. People were still there, still watching. She could control the narrative. A few carefully worded posts, maybe a hint of vulnerability, and she'd have people in her corner again. She could make Ethan look like the cold, heartless man who had abandoned her, but then she hesitated. Her notifications were flooded, not with sympathy, not with outrage, with mockery, screenshots of her past messages, private conversations, flirtations she had assumed were harmless. Her words were plastered across stories and comments, dissected, ridiculed. Women she barely knew were chiming in, some pretending to be concerned, others gleefully watching her downfall. Her mouth opened, then closed.
"You're taking what?"
Furniture, artwork, electronics, anything purchased under the joint account. It was all covered under Mr. Reynolds' financial responsibility, and as he's closed those accounts, we're here to collect. She let out a breathless laugh. "This is a joke." The man didn't blink. "I assure you it isn't." Behind him, 2 workers were already moving past her, stepping into the house. She felt her control slipping. "You can't do this. This is my home." The man gave her a polite smile. It was. Until Mr. Reynolds finalized the transfer of ownership last night. Ivy's world spun. Ethan hadn't just left. He had wiped her out completely. She could only stand there, frozen, as they stripped away the last remnants of her old life, piece by piece. This wasn't just a breakup, this was an execution. Ivy stood in the doorway, her hands gripping the frame so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her breath came in shallow, uneven bursts as she watched the movers strip her home, no, Ethan's home, of everything she had once considered hers. The elegant velvet couch where she had spent lazy Sundays sipping espresso? Gone. The sleek glass dining table where she had hosted parties, pretending her life was picture perfect? Vanished. The massive flat-screen TV, the Persian rugs, even the ridiculous designer lamp Ethan had once teased her about. All being carried out the door. She could hear her heartbeat pounding in her ears. The room, once a perfectly curated sanctuary of modern luxury, was now an empty shell. A hollow, lifeless space that reflected exactly how she felt inside. One of the movers brushed past her with an expensive vase she had picked out in Milan. Ivy snapped out of her daze, her hand shooting out to grab his arm. "Where the hell do you think you're taking that?" she demanded, her voice sharp, her nails digging into his sleeve. The man, a burly, middle-aged guy with a clipboard tucked under his arm, sighed, glancing down at her hand before looking back at her with bored indifference. "Lady, I'm just doing my job. This is all listed under his name." His name. That phrase sent a fresh wave of humiliation crashing over her. Everything she had enjoyed, the house, the furniture, the vacations, it had never been hers. She had lived in an illusion of control, believing she held the upper hand, when in reality, Ethan had been the one pulling the strings all along. Swallowing hard, she let go of the mover's arm and took a shaky step back. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be real. But it was. And it was only getting worse. Her phone buzzed in her hand, snapping her attention away from the chaos unfolding in front of her. She looked down, her stomach twisting as she saw an incoming call. Her landlord. No, not now. She hesitated for a moment before forcing herself to answer, pressing the phone to her ear. "Hello? Ivy?" Her landlord's voice was neutral, professional, but she could hear the slight edge of discomfort. "I need to discuss your lease situation." My lease?" Ivy stammered. "What about it?" There was a pause, and when the voice returned, it was firmer. "The payments for this month and next were scheduled to be covered through a direct transfer from your joint account. However, as of this morning, that account has been closed." The world tilted. Closed. The account was closed. The landlord kept talking, but Ivy barely heard him over the blood rushing in her ears. "I'm afraid unless you can provide an alternative payment immediately, we'll have to discuss eviction proceedings." Eviction. She felt like she had been punched in the gut. Ivy had always assumed she had a safety net, that no matter what, she would land on her feet. She had never prepared for free fall. She forced herself to respond, struggling to keep the tremor out of her voice. There must be a mistake. I'll fix this. Just give me a couple of days." Another pause. "Ivy, I understand this is a difficult time for you, but I need payment by the end of the week. Otherwise, I have to proceed with legal action." Legal action. Ivy barely mumbled a response before ending the call, her hands shaking. The movers were almost done. The house, her house, no, Ethan's house, was nearly empty. She felt exposed, standing there in nothing but her silk robe, surrounded by blank walls and strangers dismantling her past. Her legs moved before she had fully processed her next action. She stormed outside, her bare feet slapping against the cold pavement as she made a beeline for her neighbor's house. Mia had always been friendly. Mia had always gushed over Ivy's designer wardrobe, always complimented her on her flawless skin, always laughed at Ivy's jokes during neighborhood get-togethers. Surely Mia would help. She pounded on the door, her breath coming in quick, shallow bursts. Footsteps. A pause. Then the door creaked open just an inch. Mia's perfectly manicured face appeared in the gap. Her smile was tight, uncomfortable. "Ivy," she said, her tone careful. "I need to talk to you." Ivy blurted out, pushing the door wider as she tried to step inside. Mia's hand shot out, blocking her. "Ivy?" Mia exhaled, glancing over her shoulder as if checking to make sure no one was watching. "I don't think that's a good idea." Ivy froze. "What?" "Mia, come on. I just need—" Mia shook her head. "I heard about what happened." Ivy's throat went dry. "So?" Mia hesitated, then sighed. "Ethan told his side first, and honestly, people are on his side." Ivy felt the last thread of her composure snap. She had nothing. No money, No home, no car, no allies. Are you seriously shutting me out right now? She hissed. Mia's lips pressed together. I'm sorry, Ivy, but you kinda did this to yourself. And with that, she gently, deliberately closed the door. The click of the lock echoed louder than any insult Ivy had ever endured. She stood there, frozen, staring at the closed door, her hands clenched into fists. She stood there, frozen, staring at the closed door, her hands clenched into fists. She had never truly believed in consequences, not until now. With nowhere else to turn, she walked back to the hollow, lifeless house. The movers were gone. All that remained was an empty space and an eviction notice waiting to happen. Ivy sank onto the floor, pulling her knees to her chest. She had wanted space. And now she had all the space in the world. Ivy sat on the cold, bare floor of what used to be her home, her knees drawn to her chest. The silence was suffocating. Just yesterday, this house had been full of luxury, comfort, security. Now, it was just empty. The walls, once decorated with expensive artwork and carefully chosen furniture, now loomed around her like a cruel joke. The only thing left was her, and for the first time in her life, she was completely alone. She had always thought she was in control, that she was the one who dictated the terms of her relationships, her life, her choices. She had played men before, carefully crafting a persona of effortless charm, of confidence, but she had played the wrong man. Ethan hadn't begged, he hadn't chased after her or tried to convince her to stay. He had erased her. She swallowed hard, her dry throat burning. The weight of it all pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She needed to do something. Anything. She grabbed her phone, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through her contacts. One by one, she called people she had once considered close, friends, acquaintances, people who had admired her, envied her. No one answered. A few sent her straight to voicemail, others let the phone ring until it went silent. Her stomach twisted, she had been cut off. Jenna had been right. Ethan made sure his side was the one that was heard first. He had painted the picture of a loyal, loving man who had been betrayed. And Ivy, in everyone's eyes, was now the woman who had taken everything for granted and lost it all. She bit her lip, refusing to cry. She could fix this. She always found a way out. She scrolled through her messages and found Ethan's name. The conversation thread was starkly one-sided, all of her texts, all of her attempts, sitting there unanswered. She stared at the last message she had sent him hours ago. Ethan, please, let's talk. No response. No read receipt. Nothing. Her chest tightened. She couldn't accept this. He couldn't just walk away. With renewed determination, she stood up and grabbed her coat. She would find him. She would make him listen. Her first stop was his office. Ethan's assistant, a woman who had always been polite but distant, barely looked at her before shaking her head. He's not available, Ivy. Ivy clenched her jaw. This is important. The assistant's lips curled slightly, almost in amusement. I'm sure it is. But Ethan made it clear. He's done with this conversation. Ivy felt a wave of humiliation wash over her. She was being dismissed. She turned on her heel and stormed out, her mind racing. He had to be somewhere. She tried his favorite cafe, but the barista only shook his head. She checked the gym he frequented, but he wasn't there either. And then she found him. As she walked past a sleek rooftop restaurant, her eyes caught a familiar figure sitting at an outdoor table. Ethan. Her breath hitched. But he wasn't alone. Across from him sat a woman, stunning, poised, effortlessly elegant. She laughed at something he said, her hand resting lightly on his forearm. Ivy's heart stopped. For a brief second, she considered storming inside, demanding answers, making a scene. But then she saw it. Ethan's expression. Calm, content, free. He wasn't just moving on. He had already moved on. Ivy felt the air leave her lungs. This wasn't a game anymore. She had already lost. Slowly, she backed away, her hands clenched into fists. She turned and walked away, her footsteps unsteady, her mind numb. For the first time in her life, there was no plan, no manipulation, no way out, just consequences. And for the first time, Ivy had no one left to blame but herself.